Chapter 5. Tuesday. "Good morning, Dr. Jameson," Stephanie, the receptionist for the floor, said as Kat neared. Stephanie had been one of the first people Kat had seen the lights around, but though she had said the words that came into her head, words of affirmation on her job, the light hadn't left Stephanie. Kat wondered what else she needed to say. "Good morning, Stephanie." Kat looked both directions before leaning closer and lowering her voice. "Is there anything I can do for you? Anything I can pray for?" Stephanie's eyes widened and she shook her head. "I don't think you want to go around asking questions like that." "Why not?" Stephanie's face twitched and she swallowed audibly before pulling a small piece of paper from her stack. "Because Dr. Damon wants to see you and he didn't sound happy." Kat sighed. She'd known this was coming. Even though she'd said nothing religious to Lindsay, she'd known from the girl's reaction that her probing questions were going to get her in trouble. But they were part of the standard medical history, and not asking them wouldn't give her the whole picture, which could affect treatment. "Thanks, Stephanie. I'll go see him, but I meant what I said. If you need anything, please let me know. You can always call my cell if you don't feel comfortable talking here." "Thank you, Dr. Jameson. I might take you up on that." Kat had no doubt she would. If she still had a light around her, she could only assume it was because she hadn't made the decision to follow Jesus completely yet. Of course, she had no idea what happened when people did make the decision. Did the light disappear? How she wished Micah had given her a few more instructions before disappearing. She dropped her purse in her office and then continued down the hall to Dr. Damon's office. He was the head of the oncology department, and though he rarely saw patients anymore, he oversaw all of her cases and those of the other doctors on the floor. She presumed he then had to report to the hospital board, but she'd never been curious enough to ask. She knocked on Dr. Damon's door, pushing it open when he answered from within. Memories of entering the principal's office in a similar way when in school flooded her mind, and she pushed them away. He wasn't going to give her detention. A verbal reprimand maybe, or a write-up in her file, but nothing more. "Ah, Dr. Jameson, I see you got my message." His voice grated on her nerves. It held that nasally tone of someone who thought they were superior to everyone else. "I did. What can I do for you, sir?" He motioned to the chair across from him. "Please, sit. It appears we need to discuss the handling of one of your cases." Kat sat gingerly in the chair, though her flight instinct made her want to keep standing. "Let me guess. Lindsay Gates?" His left eyebrow cocked as he placed his hands together like he was about to pray. It was too bad she knew that wasn't his next step. "I see you are aware of your misstep, then." Kat bit the inside of her cheek and took a deep breath before answering. "It wasn't a misstep. It was a standard medical question. I am trying to determine the best treatment for her, and the way to do that is to get all the pertinent medical information. I informed her that she didn't have to answer the question." His face folded into a snide expression of insincerity, and his fingertips tapped against each other. "Now, Dr. Jameson, Miss Gates claims that you insinuated a termination could be a risk factor for her early cancer. As you are well aware, the medical community does not believe that terminations are a risk factor for cancer." Kat's fingers dug into her thigh to keep from shaking. The medical community also once denied the risk between smoking and cancer, if you remember. Back in the 30s and 40s, cigarette companies used to use doctor promotions in their ads because no link had been discovered yet. There are, in fact, several published studies that have declared a link between abortions and cancer that would disagree with you. "Ridiculous, fanatical, religious studies. Surely you don't believe they hold any worth." He'd phrased it as a question, but it was clear that he expected her answer to be no. "I understand that the topic is still heated and that family history is still the biggest cause. But according to her intake form, no one in her family has been diagnosed with cancer. Now, she isn't overweight, but she has been on the pill and she does drink. Those are also both risk factors. So my asking about her terminations wasn't to place blame. It was to determine a clear medical history so that I can come up with the best treatment plan for her." "But you do believe terminations could be a risk factor?" Kat let her breath out slowly to keep herself calm. The studies have shown that hormone disruption may be a link. Now, that can come from being on the pill, waiting longer to have kids, not breastfeeding, or terminating a pregnancy. I'm simply unwilling to rule it out as a possibility until we know more. He sighed. I was hoping that you would come to see the error of your ways, but as you are clearly deluded, you are now a liability for the department. I have no choice but to place you on administrative leave until the board comes to a decision. Kat's jaw dropped. What? You can't put me on leave simply because you don't like a question I asked. His snide smile returned. Actually, Dr. Jameson, I can. This, along with your religious discussions that have been documented as occurring during company time, and the instances of you being seen speaking to someone no one else could see in the last few weeks, allows me to make this decision. Whether it is temporary or final remains up to the board, but I will be taking over your current cases for now. You are dismissed. Kat wanted to argue, to plead her case, but then Micah's words sounded in her brain. This world is not your kingdom. Your kingdom is in heaven, and your job is to tell people about Jesus. She supposed she'd known even then that she might lose her job, but she hadn't expected it to happen so quickly. Understood. I'll gather my things and be out of your hair shortly. Though she could feel the tears building in her eyes, she refused to cry in front of him. With all the dignity she could muster, she rose from the chair and walked out of his office with her head held high. Jordan took a deep breath before answering the woman who sat across from her. This wasn't going to be easy. Samantha, I know you are worried about your husband finding out about your affair. The woman's gasp interrupted Jordan, and her hand flew to her mouth. Fear radiated from her wide eyes. Jordan waited for the question she knew would come. How did you know about my affair? Samantha's constricted voice was not much louder than a whisper. Gone was the brazen young woman who had entered with abortion on her mind. Jordan wondered what had made her come to the Options Pregnancy Clinic in the first place. Hadn't Samantha realized they didn't promote abortion here? I could tell you, but I don't think you'd believe me. Did my husband hire you? Does he have some sort of camera watching us now? Jordan shook her head. Samantha, I don't know your husband. This is actually only my second day on the job here. Look, this is going to be hard to believe, but I know about your affair because I have visions. Samantha leaned back in the chair, and Jordan recognized the apprehensive look that covered her face. She'd seen it often. Right now, Samantha thought she was crazy, but it was about to get much worse. About a year ago, I was raped. I considered abortion too until I had a vision of my unborn child, my son. Then I knew I couldn't kill him, but I couldn't raise him either, so I gave him up for adoption. Afterwards, I felt empty, and I asked God to help me, to use me. The next day, I began having visions of other people I needed to talk to. I had one of you this morning. Samantha shook her head slowly, but Jordan continued. She knew she was close to the woman believing now. I could give you his name and details of your meetings, but I'd rather not. What I can tell you is this. If you abort this baby, you will be haunted by guilt, and your marriage will fall apart anyway. But I can't tell him. You can. Your husband will be sad and angry, but he's a good, God-fearing man, and he will forgive you. But then you have to decide to choose the right path. You have to let the other man go. Samantha stared at her a moment longer before swallowing hard and nodding. The look of apprehension still lay on her face, but Jordan could see in her eyes that she believed. Thank you, I think, Samantha said as she gathered her purse and stood. I know it isn't easy, and I'll be here for you whenever you need, but it's the right thing, Samantha. Samantha nodded one more time and then exited Jordan's office. Jordan sighed. This never got easier. Suddenly, searing pain filled her head, and she squeezed her eyes shut. Her hands flew to her temple as if they could keep it from pounding. The baby came into focus again. He was still crying, and the black shape was there, only this time it was more solid, a person, or at least a person-like shape. Claw-like hands reached into the crib and picked the baby up, and his cries intensified. Jordan screamed as the face of the shape came into focus, and then her world went dark. Raven narrowed her eyes at Kat, who was punching a bag across the room. She looked so innocent, so pure, but Raven knew there had to be more going on behind the pretty face. There had to be dark secrets lurking in her closet, things she wouldn't want anyone to know. She'd learned the hard way that everyone had secrets, no matter how hard they tried to pretend otherwise. And the ones who tried the hardest usually had the darkest secrets. "Earth to Raven, you gonna work out today?" Raven turned her attention back to Lily, her mitt partner for the day. Lily was a nice kid, 14 and goofy. Her long blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail and swung a lazy pendulum behind her back with every movement. Raven remembered 14, but she hadn't been goofy and fresh-faced. By 14, she'd already been passed around to her father's friends at least once. She'd experienced pregnancy and an abortion, along with all the guilt and fear and hatred that accompanied it. A part of her envied Lily, her childhood, her innocence. She might have struggles in her life, but Raven doubted it was anything like her own. "Yeah, sorry." She glanced toward the board to read the combination Brian had written. "What's your deal with Kat anyway? She seems nice. A little obsessed with John maybe, but nice." "What do you mean?" Raven threw the jab cross hook combination before letting her eyes slide to Kat once again. Her focus didn't seem to be on John at the moment, who was busting out some random combination with his best friend on the other side of the gym. "Probably nothing. She was just talking the other day about his light." His light? Was this cat girl crazy? That might be just the chink Raven was looking for. People didn't like crazy. It scared them. Jab, jab, hook, and a roll. Lily shrugged and moved to match Raven's new position. "I don't know what she meant by that. Probably just that he was so good. But she watched him for like 5 minutes. I told her he was going to think she had the hots for him." Raven doubted that. She didn't know John well, but he was one of the most focused boxers she'd ever seen. He rarely even spoke to people at the gym, except for his friend Jesse. The two of them would come in, do their own routine, or Brian's occasionally, and then leave. Kat could probably stare at him the whole class and he wouldn't notice. "What did she say to that?" Raven asked as she threw the final combination of the round. "Nothing, but she stopped staring at him." Was it possible Raven had it wrong? That Kat didn't have an eye for Jason? The girl had denied it, but Raven trusted people about as far as she could throw them. It didn't matter. Kat was a thorn in her side no matter who she liked, and Raven was determined to get rid of her. Kat stood as the teapot whistled. She was glad for the excuse to do something else. She'd spent too long sitting and thinking about her suspension. What in the world was she supposed to do with all this free time? She hadn't had so much time on her hands since before she'd first gone to college. If Stella were alive, perhaps they could spend the time shopping or dining at restaurants they had never had a chance to eat at before. But Stella wasn't still alive, and her death had triggered all of this. The lights, Kat talking to an angel, her sharing her beliefs. It was so crazy how her life had changed in less than a month. "Is that tea?" Kat jumped at the sound of Jordan's voice and was glad she hadn't already had the kettle in hand. Spilling hot water on herself sounded as appealing as being suspended, actually. "It will be," Kat said as Jordan fell into a chair at the table. Something was off about her. Her face was pale, and her shoulders curled forward as if pressed by an invisible weight. Had she had as bad a day as Kat had? "Shall I pour you some?" But Kat already knew what Jordan's answer would be. Before she'd started her job, Jordan would wake every morning at 6 and spend an hour reading and praying. Kat didn't usually have to get up that early, but the sounds of someone else in her house had woken her the first morning, so she decided to join Jordan. The girls' breakfast consisted of cereal, a banana, and a cup of tea. Lunch would be a sandwich or a salad, complemented with another cup of tea. Kat had no doubt that's what she had packed yesterday and today for lunch as well, even though she had eaten it at her work. Though not English, around 4 o'clock she would fill another cup of tea and sip it as she read or worked a crossword puzzle. At 6, she would begin making dinner or ask Kat how she could help if Kat had already started. The dishes would be washed and put away shortly before dinner, and then Jordan would either read or watch a little TV. Kat had often wondered how Jordan had taken time out of her routine to find Kat if she was this methodical, but perhaps it was more a reaction to living in an unknown place than how she was normally. "Please, it was an exceptionally hard day today." Kat glanced over her shoulder to see Jordan rubbing her temples. The girl didn't often show her fatigue, but Kat knew her visions had been getting worse, or stranger. Jordan hadn't seemed her usual cheerful self since church on Sunday, but Kat had no idea why. She'd assumed it was the nervousness of starting a new job, but now she wasn't so sure. At times like these, she wished she had Jordan's gift, so she could have a little insight. Neither of the girls' gift was all that pleasant, and on most days, Kat figured she would take her lights over Jordan's visions any day. But right now, she wished she could see what was bothering the girl. "What happened today?" Jordan sighed as she pulled her knees to her chest and wrapped her arms around them. "Met a woman who wanted to have an abortion so that her husband wouldn't know about her affair." "Whoa, that is heavy." Kat poured the water into 2 mugs and then carried them to the table. Jordan picked up her mug, blew softly into it, and then took a sip and shook her head. "I know I get these visions to help people, but sometimes I wish I didn't have to know all the dirt." "Did she change her mind and decide to keep the baby?" "I think so. She said she would think about it." Jordan blew out a heavy breath. "I love helping these women, but seeing them reminds me so much of my son." Jordan had mentioned her son briefly, but more as an explanation for her visions than details about him. Kat had questions about him, about the experience, but Jordan hadn't seemed open to sharing more at the time. Kat figured she would open up when she felt comfortable, but she did wonder if Jordan had gotten to hold him before she gave him up. "Do you miss him?" A sad smile spread across Jordan's lips. "Every day, especially now with the rapture hanging over us. I just wish I could see him one more time, you know?" Kat understood that feeling. Though she had no children of her own and knew that bond was different than what she felt for her best friend, she would give anything to see Stella again. "I hear that. But you know you will in heaven, right?" Ugh, why was she using those words with Jordan? They hadn't helped her when she had been hurting, so why did she think they would help Jordan? Jordan bit her lip and turned the mug in a slow circle. "There's more, though. Sunday, before you picked me up, I had a vision of a baby. He was crying and a dark shape stood over his crib, but that was all I got." Kat's brow furrowed. She'd never received visions, only dreams. And she was certainly no expert on Jordan's visions. But from what the girl had told her, that did seem odd. "Does that normally happen?" Jordan shook her head. "No. Normally I get the whole scenario. Who I'm supposed to talk to, what I'm supposed to tell them, what secret information I'll need to let them know I'm telling the truth. The only other time I've received partial visions was when I was coming to find you. I got them in spurts, like I first saw you yelling out the window and crying while it rained. That wasn't enough information, so I asked for more, and I got the feeling that I was supposed to come see you. But all I received was Washington State. Then on the plane I received Olympia, and then in the hotel I got a vision of Patrick. I guess they came that way so I couldn't ask questions and would just follow the prompting." She sighed before continuing. "Sunday, all I got was the baby in the dark shape, but then I didn't get a vision Monday morning like I normally do. I had another vision of the baby today, only this time the dark shape had form, and I saw claw-like hands lift the baby up." Her eyes fixed Kat with an intense stare. "I think that baby may be my son, Kat, and I think he's in trouble." "Okay, let's pray about it and see if God shows us what we need to do." "But why would he be in trouble, Kat? I thought we were supposed to be saving people old enough to make their own decision about God. My son isn't even a year old. He can't even talk." Kat placed her hand on Jordan's arm. "Look, this is all new. The world as we knew it is changing, so all we can do is trust and pray, right?" Jordan sniffed and wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. "You're right. I'm just so scared." "I am too," Kat thought to herself, But she didn't say it out loud. She needed to be Jordan's rock right now. Her own fears could wait. Couldn't they?